Welcome, listeners, to the first official episode of the podcast. We start out with a couple of scores over the weekend. You got LeBron dominating Game 7, beating the Pacers in 7 games, move on to play against the Toronto Raptors, who won in 6. We got the Boston Celtics in an ugly series against Milwaukee Bucks, squeaking out of Game 7, and then we have the Rockets and the Warriors taking command of the semifinals with Game 1 victories. And then we head to the draft. Baker Mayfield going number 1 overall, with Denzel Ward being surprising, going number 4 to the Browns as well. Josh Allen going to the Bills. Bills trading up for him. And Josh Rosen falling down to number 10 to the Cardinals. I guess that's where we pick things up off. What do you feel about the Browns going number 1 with Baker Mayfield?
Not a lot of franchise quarterbacks released initially, so I don't mind Baker Mayfield going 1. Honestly, like I mentioned, first episode, I really like his locker room presence, what he brings. I'm not sure necessarily he's going to be the starting quarterback right away, which is actually fine because he can make an impact without necessarily starting, or maybe they play him a little bit in the preseason, see what happens. But I thought Denzel Ward was a little surprising, and I don't hate the pick necessarily. But at the same time, I think there were a couple other players of value that they definitely could have gotten it for. And I think quarterback or cornerback being a need for the Browns, I think that sets him up with a little bit of pressure, and hopefully that doesn't impact his play early because they're going to need him.
Yeah, that brings me into when do you think Baker gets the reins? I know Tyrod Taylor's kind of a proven starter. He's taking the Bills. They got their first playoff experience in how many years with the Bills last year, and then they trade for him. How long of a leash
Mhm.
do you think they really give Tyrod, and when do you think Baker starts to take over?
I know he was the number 1 pick, but I think you have to think about the future here, and I think really I think you just keep it simple and play him until, or don't play him until you need him. Really, like you said with Tyrod Taylor, he's a proven starter, and I think he'll play well. They got a good group of receivers going on there, so I don't think he's really set up for failure. But at the same time, not a certain. I don't think you hold a certain game leash on him. But if it's 5, 6 games in and he's not playing well at all, not seeing any improvement, maybe the offense is stagnant, then I don't see problem with the change early on. But I don't think it's a situation where you have to push Baker Mayfield to be the starter, or really sometimes it's a situation where they want him to start, but they don't start him right away. So it's almost like everyone knows he's going to start eventually. And I don't think it has to be like that. I think you play Tyrod Taylor pretty far unless it turns out ugly. So I think that would work out best for all parties, but I guess that's why he drafted him number 1 overall, so he should be ready given the chance.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just think it's gonna be tough for Tyrod. He's already been in a terrible organization with the Bills, who really didn't put a lot around him, and then he goes
Hmm.
to Cleveland. You think he's kind of going to help them get on the right track, but if you just think about it, the fans are going to want to see Baker Mayfield. Baker's not going to be silent about not playing. It could be
Hmm.
tough for Tyrod really to control that locker room and just be ready to go the whole season knowing he's the guy. Could be tough for him, but if they're playing well, they're not going to make a change right away. I definitely don't see that at all. But that also takes
Hmm.
us into, what do you think? How good do you think Denzel Ward could be? I know he's a solid player coming out of Ohio State, and I know he's one of the top. He's probably the top corner in this draft. But I just feel like Micah Fitzpatrick or some of these other dudes could have
Hmm.
definitely gone there. Bradley Chubb even just makes maybe more of a bigger impact right away. But
Yeah.
how good do you think Denzel Ward could really be for the Browns?
I don't see it as the type of situation where he's a rookie of the year, or, best defensive rookie necessarily right away. I think he can make an impact, but I think you got to give him at least a year or two, kind of settle into the role, and don't put too much pressure on him given he was up the 4th overall pick, because I don't think that's really a pick that he should have gone. He's the best corner, so if you were going to go cornerback either way, then it's definitely the best pick you can go. But I think Bradley Chubb would have been a good pick there. And even somebody like Roquan Smith, whether the Browns needed a linebacker or not, I think there's other places they could have gone besides Denzel Ward. But I think probably eventually an all-star or an all-pro player. But you got to give him time. It can't be something where you rush him in there and expect him to be locked down right away.
Yeah. Also, how about the Jets finally making a decent pick, taking Sam Darnold, possibly a good
Hmm.
pick. I don't really know how well he's going to transition. How do you even think that Sam Darnold in New York could be? Because I know Josh McCown's kind of started there right now, which isn't anything to speak of. But then they also bring in Teddy Bridgewater, who isn't an old veteran by any means, obviously coming off a nasty leg injury. But I mean, something there is going to have to happen to that QB situation. They've already failed with multiple QBs, but bringing in Sam Darnold, what do you like about that pick?
I honestly, with Baker Mayfield going one, they kind of had the pick of the litter, in my opinion. But I think Sam Darnold was a really safe pick there at 3. I liked him. Not a lot of love for all the quarterbacks. I like Josh Rosen a lot, but Sam Darnold isn't a bad pick at all. I think at USC, there were a lot of problems with protection, and he was getting hit a lot. He was getting pressured a lot. And I think when he gets a clean pocket and he's able to scan the field and be able to make some throws, he can really be accurate. And I think that could be something where I think he's in a good spot right now. I think Teddy Bridgewater could easily be that starter for a while, but at the same time, Sam Darnold isn't that far off from taking that starting spot right away. So I like that pick with the Jets. Pretty sold on that.
Yeah, and then some of the other noteworthy picks, like you said, Bradley Chubb going to the Broncos. They kind of, with the Browns going Denzel Ward, kind of, I'm guessing, surprised the Broncos that Bradley Chubb was there at
Mm-hmm.
5, able to go. The Colts finally secure maybe a little bit for Andrew Luck taking Quentin Nelson. That should help him quite a bit. And then I know your
Mm-hmm.
favorite, the Bills trade up and draft Josh Allen. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, it was the whole draft season. I mean, everyone especially towards the end, everyone knew if the Bills are trading up, they're getting Josh Allen. There really wasn't any question about it. I mean, I personally don't like him at all. A lot of scouts liked him, and a lot of the front office and the Bills, they really enjoyed him. I assume it's because of the arm strength and maybe a little bit of mobility, but it's going to be a tough situation for him because, like you mentioned with Tyrod Taylor, there wasn't a whole lot around him there. He's he's probably going to be starting pretty quickly there, if not right away. So he's going to have a lot of pressure coming in, especially for a lot of doubters that he has. He's going to have a lot of pressure, so it'll be interesting to see how he reacts to that and how he plays with that.
I really like the Cardinals pick going Josh Rosen at number 10. I know that they didn't really know, and no one really knew where he was going to go. He could have gone anywhere from number 2 to the Giants to the Bills trading up for him, but he goes number 10 to the Cardinals, which I think is a really good fit for him. The Cardinals did just sign Sam Bradford, who's made so much money for playing so few games that I don't even know. But I just think Sam Bradford is just such an intelligent QB that Josh Rosen, I feel like, could really learn a lot from him. And then once Josh Rosen does step in, he's got very good supporting cast around him, some skill players, and Larry Fitzgerald will be a great mentor for him too as well. I just think that's a really good fit for him. I know you like Josh Rosen a lot. What do you think he could really do with that offense at Arizona?
Well, with some of these quarterbacks up ahead of him, they're kind of in a tough situation. A lot of reliance on him. Not counting Sam Darnold necessarily, but I think Josh Rosen couldn't have really gone in a better spot there. Like you said, with Sam Bradford, whether he sits behind him or Bradford has more injury issues, he comes in right away. Has a veteran Larry Fitzgerald, but he also, I believe, David Johnson is coming back. There shouldn't be any problems there with him, and if they can run with him pretty heavily, understanding Bruce Arians, understanding Josh Rosen's the rookie, they probably won't hand him, you know, make him do everything right away. So I think with all the quarterbacks going pretty early on, I think he really has the best chance to succeed early on.
Yeah, and then if we keep going down, this is one guy. I think the Dolphins taking Micah Fitzpatrick. I thought he was, if the Browns kept the number 4 overall pick, I thought for sure that's where Fitzpatrick was going, but he goes down to number 11 to the Dolphins. Then Vita Vea goes to the Buccaneers. That's just going to really improve that defensive line that's already pretty decent. One of the questionable things I was very confused about is why the Saints drafted or traded up from number 18 to 14 with the Green Bay Packers and decided to go Marcus Davenport. I feel like that might have been a guy that could have fallen to him anyway. But not only that, they got rid of future picks and also next year first. You don't see a whole lot of that, especially moving up only about 4 or 5 picks. What do you think about Marcus Davenport and that pick for the Saints?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I don't know if they really could have avoided trading those 2 first rounders to get him. I think he could have fallen anywhere down in that late first round. I'm not even sure he was a guaranteed first round pick. I like the player, but I'm not sure I like the value and pick there. The 2 first rounders is really tough to give up, especially for 14 right there. Not giving in necessarily an impact player or a skill position, anything like that. I think no, they definitely need to bolster their defense, but that was just a questionable pick to me. I don't mind the player at all, but that's just tough. Yeah, and piggybacking on your Minka Fitzpatrick choice there, I think he really could have gone anywhere in the top 10, and I'm surprised. I mean, he could have been. I think they have him listed as a safety, but he can really play cornerback, safety, slot corner, anything like that. And I still think Denzel Ward's the best corner in the draft, but Minka Fitzpatrick as well as Derwin James, they both can play corner, and they could easily be 2 and 3 in those corner spots if you want to. You can mix and match them anywhere you want. So I thought I think a lot of drafts had him projecting there at the Dolphins, so it's not necessarily a surprise. But I do think he could have gone higher. He has a really high skill set, and he's pretty versatile.
Yeah, staying in the secondary then too with that talk about Fitzpatrick. I think Derwin James falling to the Chargers at 17, that's almost a gift. I don't know how you can't pass that up. Falling to 17, Derwin James a great safety. Going to the Chargers too, a team that's already pretty decent, has a pretty decent secondary as well. That's pretty crazy. And then the Packers just played that first round beautifully, trading the Saints for that 14th overall pick, still getting the guy that I think most people thought they kind of wanted with J.R. Alexander. But I mean, they got a first round pick for next year as well. And then as we just keep going down the draft, you see a couple of guys like Isaiah Wynn, some offensive linemen going, that's high on Isaiah Wynn. He goes to the Patriots. Then DJ Moore goes to the Panthers. That should help out Cam Newton quite a
Mm-hmm.
bit. Newton has a little bit of accuracy problems, but DJ Moore, solid wide receiver. And then I guess the rich just get richer with Calvin Ridley going to the Falcons at 26. That almost just seems like a value pick. And then one questionable pick, I wasn't quite sure about this pick, and maybe you have some different opinions on it. Penny going to the Seahawks. I'm not quite sure. I feel like there's some pretty good running backs out there. I mean, he's obviously a talented running back, but I don't know. Some people like Sony Michel or like people have been saying, you can find an Alvin Kamara later in the rounds, but taking him at
Mm-hmm.
27. What are your opinions on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough pick at 27. I think it was definitely a reach, and I'm not sure anyone's going to argue that. Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, Darius Geis, Ronald Jones, there were countless other running backs I would have taken much quicker than he would have gone. I don't necessarily mind the player, but he's definitely not a first rounder that you waste right there. I thought they reached very far, and it wasn't even a situation where all the running backs surprisingly went ahead of him, so they kind of had to react a little bit on the fly. There were quite a few running backs up there that they should have gone. That one's just questionable to me. Maybe they're seeing something, that front office sees something in him that we're all missing. Not a bad player by any means, but definitely a reach. And I think Derwin James was probably, I don't want to say the steal of the draft, but definition of a value pick there. That's a very solid pick at 17. He can play really anywhere in the secondary. I really like that. He's physical, he's quick, he's fast. Those change of hips are really nice. And, DJ Moore going to the Panthers, he's going to be electric. I'm not sure I like him more than Calvin Ridley, but, a 2-pick separation, and those two are really 1A, 1-2 right there at wide receivers. So that one wasn't a bad pick at all, helping Cam Newton, like you mentioned, because it's been a while since they've had good receivers. So Cam Newton hopefully doesn't have to do it all for the Panthers offense too much longer.
And that brings us to towards the end of the first round. The Ravens trade him back into the first round. I really like the Ravens draft. They get Hayden Hurst out of South Carolina, the tight end at number 25. They traded back and still got I think the guy that they kind of wanted, and they basically knew that they weren't trying to draft him in the teens. So I think they kind of got the guy they wanted, even though trading back and getting some more assets, and then using those assets to go back into 32 to get Lamar Jackson, and that probably was not very good, not very happy day for Joe Flacco. What do you think? What do you think Lamar Jackson could really bring to this Ravens team?
It's a different aspect than Joe Flacco, that's for sure. Especially getting him at 32. I think Ravens couldn't have really into the combine. People didn't even really think he was going to play quarterback. He obviously stayed firm in that being a quarterback, no wide receiver, tight end, whatever they were trying to make him out to be. But I actually like that pick a lot. Hayden Hurst is going to be probably a tight end. I'm not sure. I like Mike Gesicki a lot better, but they're kind of 1A, 1B right there at the tight end spot. So I didn't mind that necessarily. And I think Lamar Jackson at 32 was a really good pick. It's a safe pick. It's not something where they're going to rely on him to contribute right away and run that offense, but they're going to give him time. I think they're going to be patient with him, and I think that's a perfect spot for the Ravens and Lamar Jackson.
That brings me to the question: who was probably my favorite out of the first round? The best pick I think I saw out of the first round was probably Derwin James, just because of that value pick. Maybe it's not something that they absolutely needed. It's just the fact that he fell to 17. Maybe he's not the best player in his draft either, but the fact that he was there at that pick, who would you say was probably your favorite choice that he made there in the first round?
Yeah, I think Derwin James. That was a really good pick. I was happy to see him go in the first round, but I also think he could have gone much earlier. A lot of these teams could have maybe they weren't necessarily looking for a secondary player, but he's just so versatile. I mean, he's so fast and he's so physical. He's going to be a great safety for years to come. And I think again that Calvin Ridley pick was nice. I really like him at the wide receiver slot. He didn't necessarily fit into that Alabama system, but of course, all those 5-star, 4-star recruits heading to Alabama, getting that recognition. I think he's going to probably be a better pro than he was a collegiate player, which says a lot because he was a good college player as well. So I maybe get a little bit stronger, maybe a little bit more physical, but he runs fantastic routes. He's quick, and he doesn't have bad hands at all. So I really like that pick as well, 26.
That brings me to the question, who do you think had the best draft class? Me personally, painful to say it, but I think I'd have to go Chicago Bears. They had a pretty solid draft getting Roquan Smith there at number 9 or whatever they had there in the top 10. He's a very solid player, making an impact right away. And then they go
Mm-hmm.
someone where a lot of scouts had valued in the first round, James Daniels. He'll be able to play guard or center for them. He's really just kind of versatile on the offensive line for them. And then the guy that kind of fell a little bit after he failed that drug test, whatever it was at the NFL draft
Mm-hmm.
combine. But I really liked Anthony Miller quite a bit, and getting him in what I believe was the third round is a very solid pick for the Chicago Bears. And I think he really just helps Mitchell Trubisky and that offense start to click. And they just signed Allen Robinson, so I feel like that's a great pickup. Who do you think had one of the best draft classes?
I think there were a couple teams that I had lined up for this one. I really liked, I really liked the. Can't think of it. I apologize. I really liked the Dolphins. I really liked that Minka Fitzpatrick choice. I was really high on him coming into the draft. Again, he's just so versatile. He's so fast. He isn't that big of a corner, but he's also really physical. He's really smart on the defensive end. I'm pretty sure they always called him the Nick Saban coach on the field. So he was awesome. And they got Mike Gesicki from Penn State, which I mentioned earlier was I liked him as the best tight end, but they got him in the second round, so that wasn't too bad. And I believe they got maybe it was a third or fourth round. They got Jerome Baker, which I like. I really like him in the linebacker spot. He's going to be quick for their defense, so I really like that. And I think the Broncos had a pretty good draft there, bringing in Deshaun Hamilton. I believe they got him in the fifth round. I'm not positive on that, but he was a great receiver out of Penn State. He runs pretty great routes, and he's quick as well. He has good hands. He was consistent throughout his collegiate career, and they brought in Cortland Sutton as well, which I wasn't as high as him as other receivers in the draft, but he's definitely a possession receiver that if you can get him to run routes, maybe run a couple packages for him, get him in between zones, I think he can do well. And of course, they got Bradley Chubb, probably second or third best player in the draft, considering how you look at it. So I think both of those teams had some pretty good drafts. They didn't just have a good first or second round, but they had a good draft overall.
Yeah, and this brings us to the biggest mistake now. I kind of got a feeling you have a little thought on a certain QB that went number 7 in the draft. You might think of biggest mistake, but I'm gonna have to go with there's in between two of them, either Marcus Davenport, just because the way they traded up, it kind of didn't make a lot of sense. They could have got him anyway. I mean, I think he could be a decent player, but we'll just have to see what he could be. He could be a double-digit sack guy, or he could be a bust that you traded up and wasted quite a bit of assets on. Or I'd say the other one that I have to go with was probably that Rashad Penny pick in the first round. Just not really quite sure I really like that pick, especially some guys that were still out there. And kind of, I didn't really hear anybody really that high on him, like he was a must go get. So I feel like if wherever they're standing, they probably could have ended up getting him anyway. But who was your probably biggest mistake from the draft?
Yeah, I think that Rashad Penny one's tough to get past. I don't think that was a first round player, considering I do like the running back class this year. Not a lot of people like running backs going in the first round. But if you're going to choose that running back, I think there could have easily been 3, 4 running backs you could have taken ahead of him, honestly. And I just don't think I'm not sure what they were thinking. I'd like to be in that draft room and see what they were thinking. But I also, whether people agree with it or not, I did not really like the Frank Ragnow pick for the Lions. They needed to get their offensive line in check, but taking that center in the first round, I wasn't really sure about that one. I think they definitely could have waited there, maybe until the second round. But I believe they got on Johnson from Auburn in the second round, which I really like that pick. So they weren't all bad, but I thought they kind of reached there in the first.
That also makes me think about what do you think John Gruden's kind of plans were coming into his first draft back in quite a while. I mean, I know you were pretty high on the Williams tackle from Texas, but
Hmm.
going number 15, trading up and getting Colton Miller, the tackle from UCLA. I mean, probably a pretty good player, but not quite sure that's really what you needed. And then just looking at some of the
Yeah.
other picks, I think the best pick they probably has were Maurice Hurst. If he can be healthy, you know, he had that heart issue from the combine and everything, but he's a pretty good pick in the fifth round. But I'm really not quite sure what John Gruden was really thinking about. What are your opinions on like Colton Miller and some of the people they took there?
Colton Miller, I didn't. I don't know. I think, like you said, I'm not sure that's what they're really looking for in the first round. I believe they got maybe a few draft picks out of that, so it's not a total loss. But I just think I keep coming to a value pick. I think they definitely could have done a lot better. They got Arden Key from LSU. That was a great pick. I really like that pick. And Maurice Hurst, I think he went in the fifth round, which is an absolute steal if he's able to play. So that was a great pick. And I think they didn't have the worst draft out there, but some of the trades they were making and the way they were going about it, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what they were thinking at times, but it was an okay draft for their first one. I'll give them a pass.
That brings us to what would be your thoughts on who, I mean, Lamar Jackson's probably out of the question, but who do you think is the first QB to get a star or even play? If we're taking out injuries, saying that everyone is healthy out of all these teams, who do you think might be that first QB that gets to start? You think it's Darnold with the Jets taking over McCown and going over Bridgewater? Or you think it's Baker Mayfield just because everybody wants to see him? Who do you think's that first QB?
It really pains me to say it, but I think it's going to be Josh Allen. They traded all the way up there to get him. I think maybe they got AJ McCarron up there in the free agency, and I don't really trust him very much, honestly. And they're really invested in Josh Allen. I think with Bradford's injury history, I think Josh Rosen has a good chance to start early, but I think Josh Allen's a foregone conclusion at what they want at quarterback. So whether he succeeds or not, I guess we'll see. But I think it's Josh Allen at this point.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably going to be Josh Allen. I also could see Josh Rosen being there just because if he really is NFL ready, as I say he is, with Sam Bradford not playing a whole lot last year, and I don't even know how much Sam Bradford can really play in a year anymore. But I could see Josh Rosen being up there. But yeah, Josh Allen just has probably the perfect opportunity to be there. But who do you think is going to be Offensive Rookie of the Year? I'm probably just going to have to go with the safe pick, safe bet, Saquon Barkley, Offensive Rookie of the
Mhm.
Year. But who do you think could be up there contending with him, or even who do you think if you have anybody else being Offensive Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, I think he definitely has the best chance, Saquon Barkley, which I thought something that a lot of people maybe didn't think about, and I don't necessarily blame him because, as we talked about earlier in the first episode, I really like Saquon Barkley, probably the best player in the draft for me, if not Bradley Chubb. So I don't mind the pick, but it sounds like they're stuck with Eli Manning, and maybe they're okay with that for a while. But I think that sets them up pretty well. They've been lacking a run game for a little bit. Paul Perkins clearly it just isn't doing it in New York, so. I like Saquon Barkley. I think either Saquon Barkley or Josh Allen probably is going to put up some numbers. But if it depends on how all the quarterbacks play. If Josh Allen plays early, I think he can have a really good year, like we talked about with their offense. They're pretty fully loaded there on offense. So I think Saquon Barkley is the pretty safe pick, but I think Josh Allen or Josh Rosen are going to have put up some pretty good numbers if they're able to start right away.
And then Defensive Rookie of the Year. This one can be kind of tricky because you kind of have to think about how much a player is going to play right away. Denzel Ward probably going to get
Hmm.
quite a bit of playing time, but you never really know the stats that they could put up, especially there in Cleveland. You don't really know how well Denzel Ward will be coveted there, and there's a ton of other guys that couldn't make it. But I think my defense rookie of the year, I'm gonna go somebody we talked about a little bit in the first episode. He kind of fell quite a bit, and he goes to the Atlanta Falcons, who I think could use a little bit of help in the secondary. But I think Isaiah Oliver might actually win the defense rookie of the year, grabbing a few picks there in the secondary. Maybe not being the one guy that's isolated on the outside like maybe Denzel Ward might be because he's going to be their top corner right away. But I think Isaiah Oliver could have a huge impact and maybe help them right away. Who's your probably defense rookie of the year? A couple of contenders.
Yeah, I like that pick. Denzel Ward's going to be tough. I think that's going to be so tough coming in as if he's even the main cornerback there as a rookie. That's so tough being isolated like that. I think Roquan Smith out there in Chicago is going to have a really good year. That's a position that they needed, and he was. I don't think there was really anyone close to him in this linebacker class. I think he was one in his own. He covers pretty well. He's pretty aggressive. He's so quick, and his instincts are just crazy. He can blitz well. There really isn't a whole lot that he doesn't do. Uh, too bad. So I really like him. I'd have to say Roquan Smith at this time.
Yeah, and that kind of brings us to most of the draft. I think we covered quite a bit of it. You see, it's going to really tell a lot once the year starts and kind of preseason, a lot of health wise about what these QBs could do in the future. And I don't even know how many of them will play other than maybe Josh Allen, Josh Rosie. We might not even see, probably won't see Lamar Jackson. We probably won't see Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold much
Hmm.
in year one. So we'll have to see a lot about those guys later in the future. But that's going to swing us right into the NBA playoffs, which have been a pretty exciting first round, but some of it's been kind of ugly
Hmm.
basketball. First off, the series go like this: Houston gets a series win over the Minnesota Timberwolves in five. Utah gets the series win over OKC in six. The Pelicans sweep Portland. The Warriors win in five pretty easily. Toronto wins all their home games and steals one in Washington to win that in six. Then you got Cleveland winning in seven, Philadelphia in five, and Boston in seven. Let's just start out in the West. We're going to start
Hmm.
out with the Rockets and the Timberwolves. I mean, the Rockets kind of took care of business there. Even though they slipped up in one game, it just kind of could definitely happen to any team in a 7 game series. But I think the more focus is on the Timberwolves in this series, even though they got beat in 5 games. What is the Timberwolves' future? You see Cat, he can be a beast. Jimmy Butler is a solid player. We all know that. Andrew Wiggins, though, has some pretty big question marks. And then Tom Thibodeau being the coach. What do you really think about the Timberwolves' future? What do you think they have in store?
I guess I'm not sure. I think the Andrew Wiggins is kind of an interesting point. I'm not sure what they're going to do with him. He really hasn't improved or elevated his game really that much the last few years. He's been a prolific scorer, and that's really no doubt. But I mean, he doesn't really the assist per game really. He just doesn't pass the ball around a lot to help his teammates. Like you said, I think Cat's a great player. He's going to be a top 10 NBA player in no time. I don't think that's much of a question. But Jimmy Butler, just looking at this series, the Rockets was a Jimmy Butler going down early or late in the regular season kind of screwed them over. The West was pretty tough. It was pretty tight knit in the middle, and they dropped from like the 4 seed all the way down to the 8. And the Rockets is just a tough matchup. So I think Jimmy Butler is a mainstay there, but he really, if he can stay healthy, I think they can get a better spot in the playoffs next year. But the Rockets just had an unbelievable year. So I think Andrew Wiggins is interesting and something I was really surprised about, which I don't know why I was with Tibbs being at the coaching spot there, but Derrick Rose had quite an interesting role in this playoff series, and he did surprisingly well. I was really interested to see how that turned out. He obviously wasn't in MVP form, and I don't think anyone expects him to ever come back to that. But I thought he played really well with the minutes he was given.
Yeah, I think the only person that thinks he can come back to what he is Derrick Rose. He probably wishes he could be that player, but I mean, yeah, the way he kind of took over a few quarters there in that series and really was one of the main guys attacking the basket for him and getting some big buckets when they needed it. He played pretty well, and maybe that's something we
Hmm.
can expect to see later in the future for him. But so Andrew Wiggins, I'm not quite sure he's really lived up to what he's going to be, and not really sure where the Timberwolves stand for financially and where everyone's contracts are at, but they're still a solid team, and if they're all healthy, they could
Hmm.
definitely be another contender for next year. I just thought they'd take that bigger step this year into like a 5 seed role or something like that, not the 8 seed and getting beat in five. But obviously, like you said, the injury and everything kind of knocks them down a little bit, and that takes us right into the next series: Utah and OKC. This could be this could be interesting for OKC in the offseason. I think losing that game six, really is goodbye to Paul George. Carmelo Anthony's already stated that he's not coming off the bench. The way he's played in the regular season and in the playoffs, the only place I can see him is coming off the bench just because he wants the ball so much. He's driven by the ISO game on the ball, but when you're playing with Russ and some of those other guys that are actually putting the ball in the hoop, you aren't going to be so ball dominant. I think he could be gone even, but he'd be crazy to think he has a player option coming in next year. I'm sure he's going to get triple the money on that player option than he will with any team signing him off of this performance.
Hmm.
But this also raises question for Billy Donovan. What do you think? Are any of these guys going to be back next year? I know Russ will be back next year, but you think any of those other three will be there? And Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, and Billy Donovan?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever see Westbrook leave OKC, honestly, especially looking at the backlash that KD got. Obviously, a totally different situation, but his love, OKC's love for Westbrook, obviously amplified off of that. Him being the loyal one, staying there in that situation, he's probably going to be a mainstay in OKC for a long time, if not the rest of his career. But Paul George, I a little bit still thinks that he can stay there just because the Steven Adams is only getting better every year and their chemistry will get better. But it's he wants to win now. He wants to win now, and I'm sure there are greener pastures on the other side. And maybe he wants to go back to the Eastern Conference. But Melo, sadly, I think with the contract that you mentioned, I'm not sure anybody's going to pay him too well, especially with that comment about coming off the bench. I'm not sure he's really going to have much of a choice with his play, to be honest. But I think Melo staying would only hurt Oklahoma City. And I think Steven Adams is going to stay there. And him and Westbrook are really the only ones that I think that should be there next year from those group of 3 or 4. I don't think Billy Donovan is much for the NBA right now. I think he needs to go back to college. Just managing egos in the NBA is kind of a big thing, especially when you have all of those stars. Or I don't know if you can consider Melo a star anymore, but that's a big part of coaching in the NBA, and he really didn't do too good of a job on that. And just some of the offensive sets you saw them run, that last game 6, that last minute or so, they're just cranking up threes and finally took a timeout after 3 or 4 3-pointers. But, you got to be on top of that kind of thing, especially in the playoffs. So I'm not sure. I think that's the first move you got to make. I'm not sure what coach they're going to go after. I think Mark Jackson's a really, really good coach out there right now. And Budenholzer, I don't believe he went back to the Hawks. I think they separated. So there's some good coaches out there that they can grab that are definitely better than Billy Donovan at this point.
Yeah, it's really going to suck to see this Thunder team. I mean, Paul George could always come back, and that's going to be really nice for the Thunder if he does, but you're going to be stuck with Melo, who is not the same Melo as he used to be, still ball dominant. And then I think Billy Donovan's gone, especially after this year. And I mean, maybe even if he would have gotten swept by the Rockets in the second round, he could have been gone. But especially when you lose to the Jazz in the first round, when you have home court advantage, and they just kind of take it to you and beat you in 6 games, you just get outcoached basically against the Jazz team, who really doesn't have anything special. They just have their identity, but I don't know. This could be crazy times for OKC. You're gonna have Russ and Steven Adams, I think, have really solid years next year, and most certainly probably make the playoffs there in the West, just because Russ will carry that team. But everything else around it, you don't have a lot of up and coming guys. You haven't had many crazy draft picks up way high because you've been making the playoffs, but you haven't done a whole lot in the playoffs. So it could be tough for them. But that also brings us into Utah. I think Donovan Mitchell has really just had a crazy rookie year. He's not rookie of the year because of Ben Simmons, but he's definitely grown into quite the star in the NBA. What chances do you even give Utah in the series against the Rockets, and how well did you see them play at times against OKC?
Yeah, I think they, like you mentioned, just they're so well into their system. Quinn Snyder really has them balling in that first round. I think they just they don't really have, besides I think Donovan Mitchell, like you mentioned, is going to be a star, but besides that, they don't have too many guys that are going to be going out of their way and dropping 30, 35 points a night. I just think they all play well together. They play some pretty good team ball, which seems to be the kryptonite for that OKC team this year, because they are very ball dominant, just one-on-one isolation type of players. And while they have the all-stars, Paul George and Russell Westbrook, as you saw, if Paul George is not going to show up, that's going to be a rough time for him. So I think the Jazz are a pretty good team, but coming up against the Rockets in the next round, I'm not sure they match up very well. Gobert is a monster on the defensive end, but they just don't have as many offensive pieces to catch up with the Rockets. I think it's going to be too much. But I think they're a good team. They surprised a lot of people just by moving best of first round. So I would consider this a win for the Jazz, but I'm not sure they're going to move past much further in the playoffs.
Yeah, and after Ricky Rubio out, 10 days now, I believe it's his hamstring, but he's really kind of brought it back ever since going to the T-Wolves and really being not what anybody really expected. He had a good series against Russell Westbrook, and maybe that kind of fueled him a little bit to go out and get that triple-double and really play well in that series for Utah. And Rudy Gobert is just really nice in the middle there. Utah just kind of got their identity, and they're not really a team that's good enough to beat Houston, maybe steal a game or two, but they're not really set yet to make much of a playoff run. But they do have a solid team, and Jay Crowder and some of those guys really just helped them out there. But that moves us into the Portland and Pelicans series, where the Pelicans sweep them in 4 games. I mean, that was a good series for the Pelicans, especially with no Boogie Cousins. But I think more of the concern kind of goes towards Portland, and that makes me ask you this: Do you think Dame's in Portland forever, or do you think he's there for not that much longer at all?
Well, I know you really enjoy Pelicans give that a sweep. I think they really played the Portland I think they played the Blazers really as good as they could have. They had a fantastic game plan. Whether Alvin Gentry was the main point of that, they just played so well, especially on the defensive end. Drew Holiday showed up. John Rondo, playoff Rondo, showed up way better than I really expected him to, even with the playoff Rondo mantra coming in. But I think Dame is going to be in Portland for a long time. Kind of similar with Westbrook. They love him. He loves it there. He's been open about staying there for a long time. But I think, especially with really good regular seasons, he's had a little bit of trouble with the playoffs. But I think with a really strong regular season, it kind of overshadows that playoffs every year a little bit until they come rolling around. So I don't think he's going to be too hated there in Portland. And I think they need to get a little bit better of a bench. I think their starting lineup with McCollum and Nurkic is really coming on. I even like Aminu a little bit coming off the bench. He's quite of an X factor. So I really enjoy their team. Maybe bolster the bench a little bit more, but I don't think they're too bad of a team, and I see Dame staying there for a while.
Yeah, I think the Blazers really have a lot going with them with Dame and McCollum and even Nurkic there at the center. He's really coming on too, playing well at those guards. I agree with you. I think they need another piece or two maybe just to really bolster that bench. Maybe it's not even a big key that's going to be a starting small forward, but maybe just a couple of guys that can really come in and put the ball in the basket and not rely on Dame to score quite a bit in the fourth quarter, give him some of those wins. But Pelicans, they had a good series with Drew Holiday. He had a really good series. The Brow's just the Brow. But what do you think, Boogie Cousins? Do you think that first round series that brings him back to New Orleans, or do you think he's going somewhere else where he knows he could have a chance at winning the NBA title, or do you think he is coming back on just a pretty big deal that kind of limits the Pelicans on what else they could do?
Yeah, I think that's kind of on the Pelicans at this point. It seems like I haven't seen too much where he tips either side tips their hand too much. I think he's going to come back to New Orleans if they're able to pay him well. I think if he's going to go there where there's a chance. In the past, the Pelicans really haven't done a whole lot in the playoffs necessarily. This one was a big win for the franchise there and moving on and showing what they're worth. So I think they proved a lot to Boogie. But I guess we'll have to see what they're going to pay him because he can definitely get that type of money anywhere he tries to go. So I think if New Orleans pays him, he stays at least another year or two. But I guess we'll see and see if they make a better offer than they previously stated.
That moves us into the Warriors and Spurs series. I'm not even sure we talk a whole lot. Kind of the same about the Houston Rockets and Minnesota Timberwolves. We don't talk about the whole team. A whole lot about the team that won in five. The Warriors kind of dominated that series. That one game, Manu Ginobili kind of squeaked one by, but Steph Curry still injured. Didn't even come back for the series. They didn't need him whatsoever. Klay Thompson, KD, plenty enough. But like I said, I think we talk more about the Spurs in this series because I'm just not sure what the future is with Kawhi and Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker, obviously up there in age. They could most definitely retire. And what do you think Kawhi's doing in his future? You think he's gone? You think he's coming back? I'm really not sure because he doesn't say anything about anything anyway, let alone about leaving the Spurs and going somewhere. I'm not quite sure he's fit for Los Angeles. That just doesn't seem like Kawhi. He kind of seems like a Spurs guy, but not coming back a whole year even after I heard he was medically cleared and he could definitely play, but obviously he has his own group there that decides, and obviously his future and his health is what's most important. He doesn't want to rush back and re-injure that, especially maybe if the Spurs don't have much of a chance this year yet. But what do you think Kawhi's future really is?
Yeah, I agree with your point about Los Angeles. I'm not sure that's a type of player that kind of belongs in Los Angeles. That doesn't really, I'm not sure where his priorities are. The Spurs are going to pay him the supermax if he stays. So I think that's really something that he can look forward to. The exit interviews are going to be really important because I've heard, Popovich still has a pretty good relationship with Kawhi, and I think he's kind of a Spurs guy. That personality kind of just fits. I think that's kind of the spot for him, and maybe there's something we don't know with this whole situation. A lot of players are kind of upset. You saw Manu and Tony Parker say a few things about him, whether he was actually injured or not. And I can understand why that makes them angry if he was just sitting out, especially with the big playoff series coming up. But, I think these next few weeks are going to be pretty telling to see what he does. But I have a feeling he's going to stay in San Antonio. He's going to be a Spur for a while, and I think they'll pay him a good amount of money to keep him.
Yeah, I agree. It's just got to be frustrating. You don't really hear a whole lot about the Spurs players kind of speaking out like Manu and Tony Parker did. Tony Parker said he had the same injury, but he came back. But I mean, there's got to be something we don't know because you usually don't see a
Hmm.
player like that just sit out for that long, even when he's been cleared. And he came back for like a game, played restricted minutes, and just, I mean, he didn't look the same, but no one really expected him to be the same after being almost a year out with an injury.
Hmm.
But there's just got to be something else there. And it's just not like any situation we've seen because it wasn't like maybe like the 76ers where Embiid and Ben Simmons sat out because we knew what the end goal was for them to develop and them to get
Hmm.
better, to get through this process where they're at now. This is a team that's already been competing and really just needed Kawhi to be that next step and help them maybe get a series win here in the playoffs. But like I said, yeah, like you said, I do believe he's coming back. He's not really made for Los Angeles, even though he could get some big money there. I'm not really sure that Kawhi's even worried about the money. He can get it anyway in San Antonio, but it's just weird. He doesn't come out and speak about it, and we don't see much about him. Don't see him on the bench or anything like that. There's just got to be something else that we don't know. Maybe him leaving San Antonio brings that out and brings something else out there, but I think he's staying, like you said. But that rolls us into the East. Toronto and Washington. We get the kind of the same story with Washington every year. Toronto finally figures it out a little bit, gets that game one win, and wins the series in 6 games. But it's almost like the same story with the Wizards once again. Even though we did see Wall come out, I believe he said Beal had an MVP like series or season or something like that. So maybe trying to get them on the same page. We know they've been kind of back and forth on teammates wise with chemistry, but with the Wizards, it kind of seems like the same story. No bench. They just get dominated by the Raptors bench most of the series, and I mean, you got to fix that bench if you want to advance in the series. What are your thoughts on the Wizards going forward?
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. Toronto kind of started playing defense. They started passing up all around a pretty big isolation team in the past few years, and that proved pretty inefficient, pretty not working in the East. And it works to get them there in the East, but once you have to really, if you're playing in the Eastern Conference, you have to think about LeBron. You have to think about what you're going to do to beat LeBron because you can get in. It's really not that difficult. You saw Philadelphia jump all the way up to the 3 seed in the East. It's not going to take that much to make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, but you got to develop your team to beat LeBron as long as he's there. And they really they did a better job of that. And I'm still not, but I do think they moved on the way Washington needs to move on. I think the way the Wizards are playing, I'm not sure how you do it or who you get rid of, but I think they need to change some things up, like big things. Whether they get rid of John Wall, because you could see when John Wall was out, they were not a better team by any means, and a lot of people tried to say that. I don't think that's true, but the ball movement and things like that, it was a lot more, it seemed, chemistry centered. They seemed to pass the ball a lot. They just seemed a little bit more efficient. Thomas Satoransky is not the he's not the future at the point guard position, so that's not where I'm going with this. But I think the Wizards need to change something up at this point. I don't think they won 2 games and it was in 6, but I don't think Washington was ever really going to win the series. And Bradley Beal and John Wall are going to have their games and they're going to go off, so that's at least good for one game. Obviously, 2 in this situation, but I think they got to change some things up there.
Yeah, John Wall, like you said, he was out for a little while, and the Wizards just seemed to play a little bit better, which obviously that could be true, not true. I mean, maybe they just all, maybe with him out, they all invest on what the team goal really was, and maybe the coaching staff was able to kind of like put a game
Mm-hmm.
plan on him instead of just saying John Wall do take care of this and do this, or John Wall not buying in on the defensive end or something. I mean, obviously, John Wall is out there going to give you about 20 and 10 somewhere around there most
Mm-hmm.
nights, but still you just see it every single time. He's just a little ball dominant. You got a guy like Bradley Beal out there that you can definitely use quite a bit. And Marcin Gortat, he's there, he's big, takes up space, rebounds the ball, can finish some layups, but there's just something else you need there. Otto Porter isn't that guy, even though he's kind of progressed quite a bit. He's just not there to really be that next guy that's going to dominate. And like you said, beat LeBron in the East.
Yeah.
It's not like the West where you can beat the Timberwolves and you come in. It's going to be a tough series against the Rockets, and it's really the seeding is huge in the West. In the East, it's really if you get in, you have a shot until you face LeBron. That's the one person you have to focus
Mm-hmm.
on. It's not like the Bucks getting the 7th seed and the Wizards getting the 8th seed. They know that they're going to get dominated by those teams. It's definitely competition. It's just getting in beating LeBron. But like you said, I also agree that the Wizards are going to have to change some stuff up, whether that's John Wall leaving, going somewhere else, or that's Bradley Beal speaking his frustration about what's happening, or maybe they stay where they're at and just continue to have the same results. I'm not quite sure, but I think the Raptors getting the big playoff series win there, that's pretty big for them. moving on, and DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry maybe finally getting past some of their playoff woes, especially Kyle Lowry. Have to see what he's like next series, but that's going to
Hmm.
take us right into Cavs and Pacers, a pretty crazy series. I mean, Victor Oladipo kind of proven who he really is after getting traded from the Thunder. Him and Sabonis, I wasn't quite as sold on this series. I'm not quite sure how good of a series he ended up having, but some of the times I watched him was not very impressed by him. And then
Hmm.
there's LeBron James, who had very not much help, and he just kind of took over that series. And it was LeBron's going to score 45. It's either you win or you're going to lose that one. What do you think? What did you think about the series?
Yeah, talk about one man team there. I mean, LeBron didn't think people stepped up in this game seven, which, if you're going to choose any game to step up, give me game seven. But Tristan Thompson played a massive game today on game seven. He, that's what got him the big contract, 70, 80 million, whatever he's making. He rebounded the ball really well. He was finally physical. He was putting the ball up when he was close to the rim. And I just think Kevin Love had really just a poor series, and he's really going to have to step it up. Otherwise, they just don't have much of a chance. If they even make the finals at this point, which I think they'll make the conference finals no matter what, but if they make the NBA finals with this type of team and this squad playing the way they are, they're going to get swept, whether it's Houston, New Orleans, or even if we become something crazy like the Pelicans somehow making it there. But you know what I mean? It's not going to end very well for the Cavs this year. And I think that does not leave a lot of hope that LeBron's going to stay in Cleveland, and I don't really blame him because the Pacers, when you look at the rest of the East, I think the 76ers are better than the Pacers, but I think the Pacers really outplayed themselves here. Bogdanovich had a few huge games, and I think Sabonis is a pretty young player. He didn't destroy the series or anything by any means, but he brings a different aspect to their starting lineup, being able to shoot the jump shot in the mid range pretty well. And Thaddeus Young he's pretty consistent in what he is. He's going to be a 20-point scorer, but he can hit you from range. He can bang on the inside. Miles Turner's kind of the same way. So I think the Pacers played really well. Oladipo had a few tough games. I think if he really would have been more consistent, they might have even pulled this one off. But playing LeBron in a game seven or elimination game does not do well for many teams. So I think the Cavs were right to win this series. I wasn't too surprised, but they're going to need some serious help, and the role players are going to have to play really well for them to do much better in the series to continue.
Yeah, I think LeBron just looks at that roster and looks at the way things are going. I'm not sure he sits there and thinks, I really want to stay here. And if he is, he's definitely got plans behind the scenes that we aren't seeing, where he's got people coming in or talking to the general or the front office and kind of thinking like, I want these people next year, otherwise I'm gone. He's got to have something else. Otherwise, I don't think he really
Mm-hmm.
looks at his roster and thinks, I want to wait for some of these guys to develop. I want to wait and get our draft pick and develop this guy or anything like that. He wants to go win. He's old. We'll have to see. He's still dominant, but yeah, he had a pretty good series. Obviously, dominated that series. I think Oladipo did too. Which brings up this question: after seeing this, where do you think Oladipo ranks in shooting guards now in the NBA?
That's a tough one, honestly, because I think a few guards really stepped up this year, and I think if I had to choose my top five, whether you consider Harden a point guard or not, with Chris Paul on the team, I think he's strictly a shooting guard at this point. So Harden's definitely number one, my MVP, and I don't even think it's that close. But I think Harden would be one. I'd probably put Klay Thompson at two, considering he's really upped his playmaking this year. He's the defender that we've seen in the playoffs, especially in the past few years. He's a pretty good defender, probably one of the best two guard defenders. And that also I have to point out the fact before I continue with this, Harden's defense this year really stepped up. I think people really gave him a lot of flack, but he was doing a lot on the offensive end, especially in the playoffs for Houston. But bringing in the help that they got this year and the well-rounded squad, D'Antoni, their offense, he played some pretty good defense this year, and that's why he's squarely number one. But after Klay Thompson, I'm saying probably Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is a really well-rounded player, and I really like him. And I'd probably put Oladipo right behind him. If rounding out the five, I'd probably put McCollum or Bradley Beal right behind Oladipo. So I think it's a pretty good two-guard class. I think a lot of them pretty close, especially right in that ending five area. But I think Oladipo's a top four guard, top three guard at this point.
Yeah, I agree. If you depending where you classify Harden as, I know he's pretty ball dominant, but with Chris Paul, he's a shooting guard. Without him, he's probably a point guard. But since he has
Hmm.
Chris Paul, he's definitely a shooting guard. He'd definitely be number one. Klay Thompson, on any given night, he can give you 40 to 50. He can get high. And like you said, he's definitely developed his game. I mean, maybe I believe I feel like when the Warriors were up and coming, he was more of a two-way player, and he still is quite a bit of a two-way player. But I feel like he doesn't quite buy in as much as he did defensively. But I still think he's developed his game and elsewhere, being a
Hmm.
playmaker and other things like that, and really developing kind of like a post game because he's kind of a bigger two guard. I'd throw Oladipo up there too, as well as DeRozan and Beal, and
Mm,
there's just a lot
forgot
of
that one.
them.
Yep.
McCollum, so many of them in there at the two guard spot.
I think DeRozan is, yeah, that's a good point. I did not mention him. I think I'd put, yeah, DeRozan's up there as well. I had McCollum or so. I think he has really developed a better jump shot in the past, and he's become more aggressive and controlled in his game plan. But I agree, DeRozan really jumped up for me this year.
Yep, that'll take us to 76ers Miami. This series feels like it happened about a month ago. Been kind of over for quite a while. I feel like they played quite a bit of games, kind of like one day off nights. Just went to Philadelphia, played two games, took a day or two off, then went right to Miami. And obviously, 76ers win that in five. The quickest series out of the East. 76ers Ben Simmons just proved who he was. Joel Embiid, after sitting, I believe, the first two games, showed his frustration and got in the lineup and just showed who he was. The Miami Heat, do you think this is it for D Wade, or do you think he's coming back?
I think D Wade comes back. He's not going to be a starter. I think he's reg- kind of what Melo needs to do. While he's better than Melo at this point, I think he can play a really good bench role. And you could even see coming into this series, he had a few games where he really turned it up, and he can still give you his mid-range pull-up game. I mean, his fadeaway. He's still got it, and he's not going to be consistently dropping 20 on you every night, but he can have that vintage performance every so often, and I think he still plays really hard. He's still a leader, of course. He's great in the locker room, and for some reason, I mean, you saw him at Chicago earlier in the year in Cleveland. He puts on that Miami jersey, and there's something different in him. I don't know what it is, and I don't know how to explain it. He's out there hitting clutch shots for Miami. He puts on that uniform, and it's something different. So I think he's got at least one more year, maybe 2 years, depending on how next year goes. But I don't see him retiring this year at all.
And that's about all I have to really say about that series. I think 76ers kind of dominated that series. A little bit of feud in between both teams. I mean, that's just playoff basketball, though. You're going to get it when you're playing a team five times in a row. You're going to get some frustration and obviously get
Mm-hmm.
to know people. Smack talk gets up. But 76ers kind of dominated that series, really coming around. We'll talk about them later when we advance to the next round predictions. But then the final series, not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one either. Boston, Milwaukee, I mean, 7 games, but probably the most boring 7 games you're going to really pay attention to. What are
Mm-hmm.
your thoughts on that 7 game series?
Yeah, that series missed Kyrie Irving for sure. Man, I think Terry Rozier really jumped up and really took control of that series, taking control of Eric Bledsoe specifically. But yeah, I think Giannis individually didn't disappoint, but a player that high caliber, people trying to say that he's an MVP candidate at the start of the year every year, taken he's got to take control of that team, especially with so many injuries. And Al Horford really stepped up, especially in Game 7 with Jalen Brown going down. I think he really impressed me in this series. He's not going to be someone who's giving you 25 points a night. He's not a great scorer, but he does a lot of things well. And I think he plays great defense. He seemed to be a leader out on the floor when they had a lot of young guys. So I think the Celtics are in good shape for the future, but the Bucks, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. This game really wasn't about. I mean, it was about advancing to the next round, but it wasn't really about getting the next step to win an NBA title this year. This is more about getting Jalen Brown, Terry Rozier, Al Horford. I mean, he's had his fair share of games, but Jason Tatum as well. He had a pretty good series. Just getting them this kind of experience and learn how to win in the postseason and what it takes for the future year when you get Gordon Hayward and Kyrie Irving back, and maybe make some other moves that just really helped them throughout the series. But this makes me think. I don't know what's next for the Bucks. I mean, probably going to keep the same roster. I mean, you got Giannis, who, like you said, I feel like just has to take over that series when you got Jalen Brown or Jason Tatum or a lot of Al Horford on you a bunch of times. If any decent player like LeBron James, obviously, if you want to compare him to being MVP, Giannis, then you have to kind of compare him to the other MVPs. And if
Mm-hmm.
LeBron's getting that matchup, then he's taking over that game and for sure winning it, let alone you could probably have a 50-point triple-double in that kind of matchup. But I mean, Giannis has just got to step up his game. I mean, they gave him pieces around him. Chris Middleton's a solid player. You bring in Eric Bledsoe, who's a really good point guard, and I mean, really, they just kind of halfway through the year decided they just wanted to be a team that got out and ran up and down the court, too many turnovers, and I'm just not sure what's next for the Bucks. I mean, changing coaching halfway through the year, getting rid of Jason Kidd. I'm not quite sure what's next for the Bucks. What do you think they're going to do for next year?
I don't know. I can't imagine them going too crazy and getting rid of Giannis or anything, but I think Jabari Parker being healthy is going to be something big for him. I think they need to find something solid at that center spot. I'm not sure whether it's John Henson. I think they had Greg Monroe early in the year, but they just got to find something around Giannis. A good two, maybe another All Star. That's maybe a lot to ask, but I think they had an okay bench. They just didn't have a lot of players that could just take over, or someone that when things are going wrong, the leader steps up and makes things right. I think Giannis needs to really kind of look at what this series entailed and figure out what he needs to fix. Obviously, that jump shot's a big factor, especially in the way that Brad Stevens game plan around that. He's obviously a genius. He's quickly becoming one of the best coaches in the NBA if he's not already. And it was pretty evident in this series with all of the injuries and everything like that. I think Giannis, he has some questions to answer in this offseason. It'll be interesting to see how he bounces back next year, but he's got to know the pressure's on for him.
Maybe this gives Giannis a little bit more taste of the postseason, but still, even then, I know Boston is a tough place to play, but future years, if you're going to go further in the postseason, you're going to be playing against LeBron, and maybe he's in Philly, maybe he's in Cleveland, wherever. Toronto isn't the easiest place to win. I mean, any of those
Mm-hmm.
places he's going to go, even in the future years, is going to be uh, just like it was, if not worse, as he keeps developing as a player. And maybe they'll get better, like you said. Maybe they'll add a piece, knowing that they definitely need to. But I like their bench, Dellavedova and Malcolm Brogdon and stuff. They had a pretty decent bench. Maybe Thon Maker, maybe he will progress more. I'm not really sure. He had a decent series blocking shots and stuff, but we'll have to see where he goes. But
Yeah.
I'll take us in the semifinals. I know the West, we've seen already game one, and I guess we can just give our predictions and what's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen. We'll go with the Rockets, the first series. I don't see this really going past maybe 5 games. I don't even know if it'll go past 4. The Jazz might get one in Utah because that's just a tough place to play. But the only person that's really going to put the ball through the hoop is Donovan Mitchell. And maybe there's another game where Angles or somebody else will step up and really put the ball in the basket, and they'll get a nice grindy victory in Utah. As you saw, the Rockets could slip up once like they did against Minnesota and lose one, but I don't see it going past 5. Where do you see this series at?
Yeah, I think 5 at worst case scenario for Houston, especially depending on how many misses. If he's able to miss, or if he's going to miss, 2, 3, even 4 games, this thing could be over in 4. I just think the difference between Dante Exum and Ricky Rubio is a massive difference. Not in terms of just going out there and putting the ball in the basket, but running the offense and doing it, slowing it down the way that they enjoy it. It really depends on how Rudy Gobert plays. I think Donovan Mitchell's going to get his. He's becoming quickly a superstar. He is a great scorer, whether it's behind the arc or driving it in the paint, being aggressive and getting those foul shots. But I think this one's 4 or 5, and I'd be surprised if it goes past 5 for sure.
And that'll take us into the Warriors and Pelicans. I mean, it's gonna pain me to say this, but I mean, I just see the same thing with this series. Warriors probably in 5, if not 4. I mean, Pelicans definitely could take one at home or something. Just get a game where they're knocking out shots, and Brow can obviously take over any given game. But especially with Curry coming back, you saw the first game
Mm-hmm.
getting a 20-something point victory at home, and Curry's not even out there yet. Obviously, game 2 he's gonna have a restriction. He's just getting back to form, so he's gonna be a little out of shape, especially as fast as the Pelicans like to run it up and down and turn over the ball a little too much. But Holiday, he could have a good game. He had a pretty rough game 1, but like I said, I don't see this going past 5, and it could be a sweep just like it was the year before when they played in the first round.
Yeah, I was pretty set on 5, possibly 6 if something goes really for Pelicans. But after watching the first game of the series, I think Curry's going to add a different element, and they just couldn't seem to stop anything. I think Brow is going to get his. He's obviously a fantastic talent. I'm not sure anyone can really guard him face up on the Warriors. I think as a team they defend well, but not a lot of people in the league, if anyone, can guard the Brow. So I think he's going to get his pretty easily. But they can't guard the Warriors the same way they guarded the Blazers. They have pieces everywhere. I think Draymond, even being the best point guard there, and traditional point guard, I should say, because obviously Curry is fantastic, but with him coming back, you never know. I think, like you said, there's a little bit of a curve there. I don't think he's going to come in and go crazy the first game or two, but we also saw him, I think it was in the 2015 playoffs when he came back from his knee injury against the Blazers. He came back and dropped for like 40, 45 or something in the first game back. So it's all possible. Kevin Durant's going to be pretty unstoppable. I'm not sure there's a whole lot of people that can guard him on that Pelicans roster. So unfortunately, I would like to root for the Pelicans, but I see this being a sweep pretty early.
Yeah, I agree with that one. And I'll move us right into Philadelphia and Boston, where I see, once again, probably around the same thing. I mean, winning in Boston is something else, but still, just with the talent that the 76ers have and the way they played. I mean, maybe this like week off they probably had or so, maybe that gets them out of a rhythm and Boston takes game one or something. Especially though, I believe they're most likely going to be out with Jalen Brown's probably going to be out game one, if not game two as well with the injury. I'm guessing he'll probably be out for this, or maybe they just get to the point where they're sitting him as well, trying to develop some other dudes. But I see Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid and just all the other pieces on that team probably having a great series once again. This one probably once again. I'm,
Mhm.
I'm probably going to say six, though. 76ers, I think the Celtics create a couple of games, especially at home, but I believe this one's probably over in six going to the 76ers.
Yeah, I like the 6 games. I don't think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a pretty overmatched 6. I think I'll give Brad Stevens the benefit of the doubt. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he game plans for Ben Simmons and that lack of jump shot. That's something that he's been able to do, and he's shown that he will do. Game plan against someone without that jump shot. He's done it many times in the regular season where it doesn't even matter as much, but that's going to be interesting. I think with Embiid coming back, start of the series, not middle of the series, he'll be a lot more physical. I don't think Horford's going to be able to do whatever he wants like he did in the first series. So I think it's going to be a 6 games, but I think it's going to be a pretty well overmatched 6 games for Philadelphia.
That brings us into the last series. We got Toronto and Cleveland, and as much as some people saw Cleveland play in that Pacers series, and I still don't even know if Cleveland will really have everything figured out, but it's just tough to pick against the King. I mean, it's just he's always going to get his, and he definitely is very tough to beat. And I mean, Toronto obviously maybe progressing a little bit this year and having home court advantage. I could definitely see us going seven again, but I almost feel like LeBron might just kind of take over the series. I don't know if they'll get past 76ers, and they definitely probably won't win the NBA title, whoever they face, the Rockets or the Warriors. But this series, I could almost see this being the same, maybe in five. But I also think it could go all the way to seven. So in between there, but I'm going to say that the Cavs are going to win this one. It could be really quick, or it could be painful like we saw against the Pacers. I just don't see
Mhm.
the Raptors having quite enough.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that bench gives them a little bit more than in years past. And honestly, if the Raptors aren't going to beat the Cavs this year, what other chance are they going to have? And with that being said, I still think the Cavs are going to have troubles here. I think the Raptors play a little bit more efficient offense and they defend a little better than in years past. So I think there's going to be a few surprise games in this one. I'm not sure if Kevin Love's going to step up to the plate for this one. If he plays well, I could be seeing it easy as 5 or 6, but I'm gonna go with 7 for Cavs. I think they're gonna win in 7. They're gonna win a big one in Toronto for Game 7, but I'm not sure anyone's gonna stop LeBron until he gets to the finals. I think the 76ers game is gonna be tough for him, especially with Embiid in the middle, but it just all depends. I mean, their supporting cast are so inconsistent. It's crazy to say that they can beat the 1 seed anywhere from 5 to 7 games. It's crazy, but I'll take Cleveland in 7 just because I'm not sure they're going to be consistent for a whole 7 game series.
All right, and that is about what we got for the NBA playoffs. That'll head us right back to a little bit of college football, kind of going back to the NFL draft a little bit, but more so college football. And this is kind of your specialty here. I know we love college football. We talk about it all the time. Obviously, it's the first
Of
time
course.
talking about it on the podcast because I haven't been doing this podcast very long for us to talk a whole lot about it. But just give me some of the top prospects that you have for next year's draft, or just the best players in college football that we should be expecting.
Man, I think it's just thinking about it off the top of my head for college football to go. So like, we're definitely going to be going in depth later on in the year, whenever that is. But I think it's going to be a pretty big defensive heavy year towards the end of the draft. A lot happens during the year, but I think Clemson brought back most of their defensive line. They got Dexter Lawrence coming back, who was fantastic as a freshman already. So he's been consistent. He's been a force on the defensive line as Clemson has had the past 3-4 years. I think Ed Oliver at Houston is probably going to be a top pick. I think Nick Bosa at Ohio State's going to be one of the best defensive linemen coming out, if not the best. So it's going to be pretty defensive centric draft. But I do like there are a few quarterbacks that I like out there. I do like Justin Herbert from Oregon a lot, coming off. I believe it was a collarbone injury that sidelined him the year. I do like him coming back. He's going to be quick release. He can move even a little bit, and he's got the size that the NFL always covets at the start of the year. So just someone that I see kind of a dark horse is going to be Ryan Finley from NC State. I think he's going to be fantastic. I think he's got the size. I think he's 6'4", 6'5", and he's got a strong arm. And whether it isn't the most prolific offense out there, I think he's not going to win a lot of games there, but I think he'll get his due in the NFL draft, and defensive centric for sure this year or next year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just see like Bosa, he's definitely gonna be up there at Oliver also. But then one last question before we end this thing out. I want to get your opinions on what you think Trace McSorley will be for QB prospect next year.
I haven't made a lot of thoughts about this publicly. I'm been kind of hesitant on Penn State. I think Saquon Barkley carried a lot, and even just me being a Nebraska fan, seeing running backs can really cover up a lot of team holes, considering how good they can be, how different they can change the game. Trace McSorley is not a bad quarterback by any means, but I just don't necessarily believe in James Franklin. I think Saquon Barkley was a great talent and he can change a lot for that team, but I'm sure he's being projected top 10 overall next year if there are even any mock drafts out at this point, but I just don't see it. He's not even going to be, I wouldn't even put him in all Big Ten category, top 2 teams at this point. I don't think he's going to have that great of a season. He just kind of throws it up sometimes. I think the offense isn't really carried for him to be that efficient. He's a great runner, but he gets hit a lot. He's not the biggest guy out there, so he's not a bad quarterback by any means, but he's not going to be not a franchise quarterback for me in the future, at least from what I've seen so far.
Well, that is going to be just about all we talked about. We covered NFL draft, a little bit of college football there. We also covered a lot about the NBA playoffs. You guys, just let us know what you want to see for future podcasts. That's about what you're going to see a whole lot of in the podcast. Is about the really what you should expect out of our podcast. Just really talking
Yep.
sports, letting you guys know what we feel like, and recapping a few things. But that's all we have for today. If you guys did enjoy, make sure you let us know, and we'll be keep bringing them for you guys. So thank you guys for
Of
listening.
course. Thank you.